Carry crate after carry crate of animals and birds are seized by Nebraska Humane Society animal control officers, but one taken away in a livestock trailer is the most unusual of them all.
Hey, buddy, how are you?
A zebra that had been living with the other animals on an acreage off busy Pacific Street in West Omaha.
We received a tip recently that there was an exotic animal at this location, specifically a zebra, which you can't possess here.
The Humane Society seized about 60 animals and birds. A Dalmatian is put in the back of an animal control van. Other animals removed from the property included chickens, ducks, emu, goats, donkeys, alpacas, and pigs. Some livestock had overgrown hooves.
We have numerous other domestic farm-type animals that are in various conditions.
Are you okay?
That is cause for concern in our opinion.
Someone associated with the property believed I was too close and took cell phone video, but I stayed on a neighbor's yard who had given me permission to be there.
Did you want to say anything about what's going on?
Melissa Delzell declined an interview but sent me photos taken, she claims, when she lived on the property. Pictures she says she sent to the Nebraska Humane Society, allegedly showing several animals in various stages of neglect.
We have a veterinarian on scene too to examine the animals.
While many of the animals are taken to the Humane Society, others go to partners who specialize in the care of more exotic breeds. The seized zebra will be stabled at an undisclosed location. After being on the property about 4 hours, Nebraska Humane Society animal control officers are wrapping up their seizure. The animals lived on an older acreage tucked behind brush and trees, but next door to several newer homes in an upscale West Omaha neighborhood. Near 195th and Pacific, Mike McKnight, First Alert 6.
Now, Mike saw Omaha police on the property during the search and seizure. Besides animal control officers, large animal wranglers were also present.